Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. I'm Steve, and there will be 3 sections to this episode, to this Saturday weekly wrap-up, we'll call it. First, I will go over the mostly just the injury report from Friday, but kind of a news and notes section here for news up until 3 o'clock on Friday Eastern Standard Time, and anything that comes on the old telly throughout while I am recording. And then I will go over my Stardom Situm, which I will be calling my Steels, spelt S-T-E-E-L-S, stock and scrap. Stock is going to be the gentleman which maybe the narrative is leaning towards sitting because they've had a bad week, but they're kind of a you should start kind of guy, or in the other, somebody who had a really good week who you probably shouldn't trust that, because in smithing stock, it's not the scraps and it's not the finished product. Steel, of course, is also stock before it's finished, but steel and steels, to play on words, you get it. I like it, but just to clear up, that is not stock like hodl your stocks. Let's begin with the injury report. For the most part, I'm just going to expect you to understand what players or narratives that these statuses of these injuries tends to impact on their respective teams. So we start off with Cincinnati, and T. Higgins is expected to play this weekend. Going on to Indianapolis, the coach, I believe, is optimistic that Pittman will be fine. Alec Pierce is ruled out already. And in case Michael Pittman is not ready to go, and Alex Pierce is obviously out, then Mike Strachan profiles as the guy to benefit from their absence. He's a 6'5" big guy. Yeah, he's a super deep sleeper. Don't recommend him for any regular old league, but definitely a DFS option that might be nice and cheap to go out on a limb with. Then Arizona, we have Rondale Moore and Andy Isabella already ruled out, so Greg Dortch is in play again this weekend. Green Bay had all 53 players on the practice field today. That includes 3 offensive linemen who either did not play last week or got injured in that game, and Alan Lazard. So looking more healthy for the Green Bay Packers coming into week 2 so far. Then for Atlanta, Damian Williams has been ruled out. Tyler Algier is the next man up. Rookie Tyler Algier will have a shot to take over that RB2 role, in my opinion, but not somebody I'm looking to play based on Cordell Patterson's week 1 usage. New York Giants, we have Kadarius Toney practicing today. Okay. Then for Tampa Bay, Godwin is unlikely to play. Other wide receivers are in play for Sunday. All the other wide receivers that aren't Godwin. And then Fournette was working with a trainer on the sideline, so I assume that'll be a limited participation. That is something to keep an eye on. Still thinking he's going to play, and if so, definitely not a bad play this week. On to Detroit, we have DeAndre Swift returning to practice today, so don't panic. Baltimore, both starting cornerbacks Marlon Humphrey and Brandon Stevens were DNPs. Did not practice. I believe it's participate. I spoke about, I believe it would have been the Marlon Humphreys injury, and thought it was a different cornerback of theirs. So I got that name wrong in my wide receivers video. My apologies, didn't double check it. And then James Prochet was also DNP. So Isaiah Likely could be a sneaky DFS play. Then at Denver, we have KJ Hamler as a DNP. So that shouldn't really affect much, I don't think. Then Los Angeles Rams, Van Jefferson out again. If my narrative on running back Darrell Henderson was correct in the suspicion that maybe he's a little bit more of their game plan when Van Jefferson is out, just in order to give them more of a big play type of guy, or a spark play, we'll call it, type of guy, well, then that would be good for Darrell Henderson again this week. And I have a coach talk alert for the Carolina Panthers. Matt Rule expects Terrace Marshall Jr. to get in the game this week. I don't know how to take that for fantasy purposes, other than, if anything, I would think maybe that's not a good sign for Christian McCaffrey, because he's kind of like the short, quick route guy. Just give Christian McCaffrey the ball, would ya? And then for New Orleans, Alvin Kamara is missing from the open portion of practice, which just started not too long ago prior to this. And Titans practice update. Let's see. No sign of Christian Fulton, Dontrell Hilliard, Nate Davis. Kyle Phillips is back, but in a yellow jersey. And Kyle Phillips will show up on my steel stock scraps list. So hopefully it was worth putting him on there. He took a bit of a risk with his injury. Let's move on to the steals, stock, and scraps portion. We'll begin with the tight ends. That is why I have them up over here. First steal, Albert O. In 2021, Houston allowed the third most points to tight ends relative to the mean. Albert caught all on-target passes in Week 1 that were thrown his way, and 11 of 41 targets were to the tight end position in Week 1 for the Broncos. So that is 27% of all of the targets thrown in that game were to the tight end position. And then David Njoku, in 2021, the Jets allowed the 7th most points to tight ends relative to the mean. But he is down here at 17. And if you watch my tight ends video, I'm not recommending that you go outside of the top 12 this week. I think I have the same top 12. Correct. Moving on to my stock guys, Darren Waller. In 2021, Arizona allowed the 5th least points to tight ends relative to the mean. So it is not a good matchup this week, but of course, you are definitely playing him. I know that's kind of a lame stock. And then Dawson Knox, here's a little bit of a better one. In 2021, Tennessee allowed the 6th least points to tight ends relative to the mean. Steve, that's not a good thing for a borderline tight end. Well, due to Week 1's tight ends and their output, there's just not anybody that you can feel confident putting above Dawson Knox when he plays for this offense. So, you are playing Dawson Knox this week for the most part if he's your tight end. Don't go all getting crazy. Moving on to these scraps, we have Dalton Schultz. He is a popular sleeper going up against the 8th juiciest matchup from 2021. I presented my argument against him in the tight ends rankings video, and you can see it there. If the argument for him is that Cooper Rush is inexperienced, sort of the rookie argument of, hey, rookie quarterbacks target their tight ends, well, Cooper Rush is in his 6th year. He's pretty much a vet at this point in his career. He's experienced, he knows the system, he's comfortable there. So there's no hyper-targeting the tight ends simply because of that. Now, it is a juicy matchup. You're still starting Dalton Schultz this week. I still have him, I think, maybe even as my number 6 tight end. Might have him higher than consensus here. So I just want you to be prepared for a little bit of disappointment in that game, or, if he's not getting targeted early, don't be afraid. There's still time left in the game. Pat Freiermuth is my other scrap. Once again, talked about this a little bit in my tight end rankings video, but in 2021, New England was the single worst matchup for tight ends relative to the mean, and in general, I believe that defense has always had a bit of a focus on tight ends. He is my tight end 12 in my rankings. I'm still playing him, but I'm prepared to be let down this week and excited if I'm not. If you're wondering why some of these are highlighted in green, this is linked to my league here. My Fantasy Pros account is linked to my home league on ESPN. Those are guys who aren't on any teams. I thought Jameis Winston got picked up by a team. Here are my steals for the quarterback, starting with Jameis Winston. The rushing attack for New Orleans may still be hampered, and I wrote that before we knew about Alvin Kamara and the increased possibility that he may not be playing this weekend. I am still kind of expecting him to, but it's looking more and more likely that he doesn't. So either whether he does or not, this doesn't really change my thoughts on this. And just in general, I like this offense. I think they're set up to have a pretty decent year. Not the best matchup in the world, though. Granted. And then Tua Tagovailoa. Baltimore secondary is yet again looking quite beat up. We went over that at the top of this episode. Their offense should be getting a bump with J.K. Dobbins being back, so that should help this to be a competitive game. We want some back and forth in this game, though we don't want a slow game. That's the biggest fear, I think, for Tua this week would just be a limited amount of actual plays a slower paced game. Hopefully not. Hopefully Tua throws the lid off of that football, that pigskin this week. As my stock players, a little bit of a down week for Joe Burrow, a big down week for Joe Burrow in the real world, but don't be scared to play him. Also, don't expect a huge game, but trust him. Similar story here with Matt Stafford. You're trusting the bounce back this week. Onto the scraps. Tom Brady, they have in the top 12 here of consensus. It looks like he might be falling out there. He is the GOAT. You don't bet against him. I don't bet against him. But I am willing to take a chance on a better ceiling play this week. His wide receiver core is looking pretty banged up this week. That said, we did get some good news as far as that wide receiver core goes at the top of this episode. And then Trey Lance is my other scrap. Where are you, Trey? They're right behind Tom Brady. Apparently, there may be some weather again for the San Fran game. Some not so great weather. So that doesn't help. But the floor is nice for Trey Lance. So if you feel that your team has a large advantage going into your games on Sunday against, the fantasy football team that you're playing against, go right ahead and play him because of that floor. Otherwise, I'm just fine sitting him out this week. Bring him back next week. On to the running backs. We have Antonio Gibson as my first steal. This is a bit of a cheap choice given the fact that Antonio is... Where are you, Antonio? At 15 here. It's probably not a high chance that anybody's planning on sitting Antonio, but I feel like there's always a chance of that here because depending on when you drafted, there is definitely a chance that you could have drafted 2 or 3 running backs, 3 running backs that you would be thinking about having to sit Antonio this week. I really like him this week. He is a steal for me. In 2021, the Lions allowed the 3rd most points to the running back position relative to the mean. He's a good one this week. I had CEH in my steals. You can listen to what I had to say. I just wanted to brag about that one. And so I have J.K. Dobbins in my steals. I'm not even going to go into that. I'm just putting it out there that I believe that J.K. Dobbins is going to get enough work this week that he'll at least have the opportunity to be a starting running back this week. That said, I am not telling you to start him because we don't know. You have to have somebody that's safer to pick. But I did rank him in the top 30. My other steal will be Ramondre Stevenson. In 2021, the Steelers allowed the 9th most points relative to the mean to the running back position. And here are 2 reasons that I like him. The Pittsburgh offense was not inspirational while they were on the field. Granted, that was a weird game script. That should give opportunities, that should feed into what New England wants to do, which is to essentially just run that ball, run the game clock out, and maybe kick a field goal and win 3-0. I think that would be the dream day for Bill Belichick this season. And then there is the loss of TJ Watt for that Pittsburgh defense. That will have an effect. I forget how much it was, what the exact stat was that I heard, but it was over a yard difference without TJ Watt in that defense per play maybe. I don't know that it was specific to running plays, but he is good against the run. That definitely helps out the New England running game, not having TJ Watt on the other side of the ball. Then my stock options here are Aaron Jones for number 1. It is not a great matchup versus Chicago, nor is it horrible. But you cannot sit Jones. The ceiling is just too high, and if Lazard is back, that should help the outside rushing attack, which is where you expect Jones to hit most of the time, as well as helping to open things up for Jones when he lines up in the slot. In week 1, Jones participated on 56.4% of routes. That was 11th most among the running backs for week 1 of this season. I would expect that will still be a thing with Allen Lazard, and also with the screen pass. Allen Lazard, great for blocking on the run there. He does a lot of those little great things for this entire team, makes the team better just being out there for those reasons. Also, if you're stacked at running back and in a non-PPR league, I would understand sitting him in some circumstances. Green Bay has a habit of coming out of bad games and womping up on teams, so hopefully that'll be what happens. Then Kareem Hunt is another stock option here. In 2021, the Jets allowed the single most points to running backs relative to the mean. This is mostly in regards to using Kareem Hunt as a flex option. You know what? I think I was looking at non-PPR originally when I must have made this list. I'm seeing some of these guys are a little higher than I thought. You don't need me to tell you. You should probably be starting them this week. Melvin Gordon. In 2021, Houston allowed the 5th most points to running backs relative to the mean. A little bit of bad luck the other day. Maybe this Denver offense gets things kicking a little better. It's a good matchup. I like Melvin Gordon this week as high as essentially a borderline RB2. I like him over Rashad Penny, who we will get to right now. Rashad Penny is my number 1 scrap. We're throwing him into the scraps pile. He looked really, really good in week 1. So the usage is the issue here, especially if Kenneth Walker comes back. There's just not going to be enough usage for something that I want to rely on as my RB2. In 2021, San Francisco allowed the 7th least points to running backs relative to the mean. So, also not a great matchup. And then Devin Singletary is my other scrap. The implementation of running backs by Buffalo in week 1 was not a dream scenario for Devin Singletary owners. Definitely not the end of the world either. Also, in 2021, Tennessee allowed the single least points to running backs relative to the mean. Counterpoint to that, Saquon ate up this Tennessee defense in week 1. He's a bit of a different breed than a Devin Singletary. Regardless, it's something. It's not nothing. If you can find a way not to play him, I think all the better. And that brings me to actually Mark Ingram. I should make a point of saying here, if Alvin Kamara isn't playing, I don't like Mark Ingram this week. I'm not running out to grab him off of the waivers right now due to that news. It's really not a great matchup. On to the steals for the wide receivers. A little bit of a bragging time here overall for the wide receivers. Bragging and nagging. I had MVS as a steal, kind of, in my wide receiver video. I gave a scenario where I thought he was a good option. Now, in my defense, he did get 7 targets, and I think 3 of those were deep targets. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to watch the game. I don't know exactly what the quality of all that was, but the potential was there for MVS. And on the counter side of that, I had Juju as a scrap because I didn't really like the matchup against this defense. There was a specific reason regarding Asante Samuel that I didn't like him. I don't know that came to fruition. I only had him ranked 42nd, so had him outside of the flex starter territory there. And then Josh Palmer, or on the edge of flex starting, I had ranked 28th versus the consensus, which has him down at 44, I believe. Oh, we're on wide receivers. Let's do that. Sorry about that. 43 there for Josh Palmer. I had him at 28. You're welcome if you took advisement there. Not an excellent week. Saved it with a touchdown late, but it still counts. And also, he had like 8 targets and just only caught 4 of them. Another steal here. Devonta Smith, who is ranked 38th here by consensus. In 2021, Minnesota allowed the single most points to wide receivers relative to the mean. I'm just calling it. There's nothing else to say here for Devonta Smith. I'm calling it. This will be a Devonta Smith week. Kyle Phillips. Told you we'd see him. I have him as a steal if he plays. This is a pure gameplay type call versus Buffalo, a strategic type call in my mind. The number 1 defense against wide receivers in 2021 relative to the mean was Buffalo, their opponent this week. Here's my thought process. What did Buffalo do really, really good in week 1? They got to the quarterback. They rushed a lot. And how do you counter that? You throw quick, short passes, and you run the ball. Well, we know who's going to run the ball, and it's definitely not Kyle Phillips. But Kyle Phillips was a guy who scored in the 90th percentile for his agility score. He is that quick throw option. He's the counter to this Buffalo defense, if there is one. You got to be in a deep league to be starting him, but DFS type option there. Now on to the stock options here. Number one, I have three of these. DJ Moore. In 2021, the Giants allowed the 8th most points to wide receivers relative to the mean. Don't give up on him yet. Put DJ Moore in your lineups. CeeDee Lamb I have as my second stop option. I went over this in the rankings video enough, probably in each of the quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight end videos. So you are almost certainly still playing the number one wide receiver for Dallas. For more on that, you can, like I said, watch those videos and you'll get a good idea of why I believe that. Then Curtis Samuel, I have as stock option number 3, and this is the opposite side of that coin. You are not playing Curtis Samuel this week. You're not trusting it. You want to see it happen for at least one more week before you're going to be thinking about playing him. You should definitely have other guys that you can play this week. He is a guy that I once loved, so just let you know, this isn't something out of spite or dislike for Curtis Samuel. I'd love to see him succeed. I'm not on his train, but that's not the point. The point is, you want to see it for one more week. Then on to these scraps for the wide receivers. I talked about Juju, so scrap number 1, T. Higgins. In 2021, Dallas allowed the second most points to wide receivers relative to the mean. His father died on Thursday, so first of all, best wishes to you and your family, T. Higgins, of course. Sorry for your loss. Also, in regards to fantasy football, there's a 100% chance that he's going to get targeted for a minimum of 1 touchdown. I mean, obviously Joe Burrow's going to want to get him a touchdown this week to help honor his father, and why wouldn't he? So that's happening. So trust your T. Higgins. Why is he in the scraps? I don't know what I did with the receivers. T. Higgins is not a scrap. He is a steal. I do have 2 more scraps at least. Terry McLaurin. In 2021, Detroit allowed the 8th least points to wide receivers relative to the mean. To be fair, I think that had a lot more to do with game strategy going into these games, going up against an offense that teams weren't really too afraid of, other than the more so than the talent of the Lions secondary. So as far as this call on Jazz Fingers on Terry McLaurin, on one hand, I have this gut feeling that he is a bust this week. On the other hand, I feel like I will absolutely regret putting him here in the scrap pile. I also had a tough time finding non-obvious scraps to bring to your attention. Yeah, I want to get you something a little more unique here when I am trying to bring this content to you, something maybe you haven't heard elsewhere. And my other scrap is going to be Darnell Mooney. This is not the week that I want to be trusting him. If I can avoid playing him, I would do that. Let's move on to part 3 of this video, and that is just going to be a hopefully quick game recap from the Thursday night game, the Los Angeles Chargers at Kansas City. Let's just get a quick injury recap for this game. Justin Herbert had some x-rays done, I believe, for his ribs after the game. We'll have to wait and see on that news for Justin Herbert, but in case you didn't hear, heads up, rib issue. Then Keenan Allen was out. That meant Joshua Palmer came in. I already gloated about that. So there's a debate about Josh Palmer versus DeAndre Carter. You're welcome for getting you the right answer here first. And then Mike Williams, I will defend something that somebody could try to come at me for. I said Mike Williams, I had him ranked 15. I moved him down a little. I think that's what it was. I moved him down a little bit on my list, and I said that, this doesn't really change my viewpoints of Mike Williams having Keenan Allen out specifically. His expected targets for me is only going to go up by 1 or 2 targets. Now, for a man like Mike Williams, granted, that can be quite a few points, 1 or 2 targets. So maybe I could have emphasized that a little bit more. But in 2021, he did average 8.1 targets per game. 10 targets the other night, so right on with that. In case Keenan Allen is out further, this is why I really wanted to touch on this. I would say Gerald Everett was the biggest clear-cut winner with that. DeAndre Carter was very efficient with his targets, and he had a handful of targets. And Austin Eckler also may have been a benefactor of that. I don't know if that's necessarily true as much as the defense that they're playing against in game plan there as far as the amount of targets to Austin Eckler in this game. Further issues though for Los Angeles Chargers. Corey Linsley, their center, went out, and Trey Pipkins, their right tackle, went out with an ankle. Corey Linsley knee. Linsley was immediately, if I recall correctly, pretty immediately out for the rest of the game. Officially out for the rest of the game, which is always, not a great sign. So we will see on those, but all in all, maybe we'll want to shave just a little bit off of our expectations for this offense for the short term. Then as far as any injuries for Kansas City, nothing too much here. Mecole Hardman had an ankle and then he returned to the game, but it was mentioned by the coach in the post-game conference, so the fact that that was still on his mind means something. And then Justin Watson, I don't know what the injury is there, but there was an injury that was also mentioned by coach in the post-game conference. Now let's go box score hunting here for anything we want to talk about. As far as Eckler goes, once again, I warned you about the fact that Eckler was not going to have the same usage as he had last year, which is why I wasn't drafting him as highly as he got drafted. But here's the thing. I saw at least during the game for sure before these receptions really piled up for him and salvaged his week. Here's the silver lining for Eckler is that there's less of a chance of him getting injured, more of a chance for you to have him out there every single week. Yeah, sure, he may not quite have the same ceiling as last year, but he kind of does. And he's still a RB1. You're fine. Don't panic. He's still good for you. Obviously, we know Mike Williams had a big game here. Well, let me give a shout-out to Xander Horvath. He's a prospect that I really liked as a big old fullback kind of guy. He's been doing it already in the league, so exciting. I always love to see those late-round running back, fullback type guys that I have my eye on succeed early, especially early on in their careers. So that's cool. I don't know how to find to go to the Chiefs. Oh, look at that. We could have had this on the screen the whole time. My mistake. So here are the Chiefs. So Patrick Mahomes, I guess a pedestrian fantasy game. Same with Travis Kelce, pedestrian kind of game. I thought he was going to have a big week. Got that one wrong on that, but obviously you're going to play him no matter what I said. And I did get this one right. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a good game, had one big run, but only 8 attempts in a game that was close the whole way through. So I wouldn't get overly excited about Clyde. He might be a good sell high candidate if somebody's struggling at their running backs. Already touched on Juju and that game. Kind of predicted that. I wouldn't be scared. I think Juju is still who you drafted him to be. Just wasn't a great week for him this week. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, he's droppable at this point. If you saw my off-season stuff, I was pretty high on him. Okay, so that's all I have today, this lovely Saturday for Friday when I'm filming this. So let's check for any last second updates here. Najee Harris is off the injury report, will play. I already took off, I believe, my little asterisk on my rankings for him. Thank you very much for stopping by. I love you. I appreciate you. If you have any questions, you can ask in the comments. You can tell me where I got things wrong. Give an argument for it if you're going to tell me what's wrong. There's so much information out there. Help others who are coming across this video and reading in the comments. It never hurts. And I am also going to be available again Sunday for... I'll move it to an hour since I'm not popular right now. And so I will have my stream running for any last second start sit questions. If you're having any struggles getting any answers elsewhere, don't forget about that. That stream will be up so you can get somebody else's opinion on who to play. Thank you again. Bye-bye.